In a nation that believes every mystery has a scientific explanation, how do you make sense of a 5-year-old boy who wakes up screaming a name from a life he never lived? How do you explain a child who remembers dying in a burning house miles away, decades before he was even born? And what happens when the past refuses to stay dead? The snowfall had just begun in Riverview, Minnesota, when Aiden Miller opened his eyes for the first time. Nobody in the hospital that morning knew that the newborn child was carrying a story older than his heartbeat. For the first 3 years, his parents believed they were raising an ordinary American boy. He crawled, stumbled, learned to walk, and filled their home with laughter. But everything changed when he turned 3 and answered a simple question in a way that froze his mother's blood. His mother, Rachel, buttoned his small jacket and asked lightly, "What's your name, sweetheart?" Aiden looked right into her eyes with a seriousness she had never seen before and said, "My name isn't Aiden. My name is Eli Porter." Rachel laughed at first, thinking he was playing, but the way he repeated the name, slow and steady, made something sharp twist inside her chest. "That's who I was before I died." A 3-year-old saying something like that wasn't normal. She told her husband, Daniel, who brushed it off as imagination. Kids create imaginary friends. Kids say strange things. But Aiden didn't stop. He began describing things he should not have known. A yellow farmhouse with chipped paint. A red barn with doors that creaked in the wind. A dog named Baxter who had one blue eye and one brown. A girl named Lila who wore silver bracelets that jingled softly whenever she laughed. A man who played the harmonica every night sitting by the porch. Aiden described these details with such clarity that Rachel felt as if he had lived in that house. But how could a child from Minnesota know about a place in Tennessee he had never visited? When the plane lifted off the runway in Billings and the night lights of Montana faded beneath the clouds, Ethan felt a strange heaviness inside his chest, as if 2 different hearts were beating at once. The engines hummed, people slept, the flight attendants moved silently down the aisle, but he stayed wide awake, staring at the darkness outside the window. He wasn't traveling to Italy as a tourist. He was traveling there as someone who was returning home after a lifetime. But whose home? Ethan's? Or Adriano's? He couldn't answer. During the long flight, he kept feeling flashes, not memories, but something deeper, like emotional echoes. A sudden tightness in his throat every time he thought of a narrow alley. A sense of calm when he imagined old stone houses. Every few minutes, a smell of baked bread drifted through his nose even though no food was being served. Elena's Bakery, a place he had never seen, yet missed desperately. When the plane landed in Rome the next morning, Ethan's hands were trembling. He hadn't slept a single minute. The airport announcements, the Italian accents, the scent of strong espresso, all of it felt familiar in a way that terrified him. He rented a small car and began the long drive south toward Matera, the city from his memories. The highway stretched along open countryside, with vineyards rolling across gentle hills and old stone walls running beside the road. Every mile he drove, his heartbeat grew faster. Around sunset, the ancient city finally appeared on the horizon, carved into cliffs, lit by golden street lamps, looking exactly like the images burned into his mind. Ethan pulled over on the side of the road. His breath broke. He whispered, "I've been here before." But he hadn't. Not in this lifetime. The deeper he drove into the city, the stronger the pull became. Streets looked familiar. Turns felt predictable. His hands moved on their own as if following a map invisible to him but engraved in his soul. The city of Matera stretched beneath the afternoon sun, every stone wall and narrow alley steeped in centuries of history. Ethan Price, carrying the weight of memories not his own, walked silently through the familiar streets, his steps careful but instinctive. Each turn, each corner, seemed to awaken fragments of Adriano Russo's life, a life that had been violently interrupted decades ago. He could feel it in the air, the tension, the old grudges, the unfinished stories that had somehow reached out to him across time. Lucia had guided him to a small room in her family's house, where the sunlight filtered through thin curtains and illuminated dust particles dancing in the golden haze. The silver pocket watch rested in his hand, its cold surface grounding him, anchoring him between 2 realities. He could almost hear Adriano's heartbeat echoing in his chest. Adriano's death was not an accident. Lucia said, her voice soft but firm. It was deliberate. Vittorio Serra. He orchestrated everything. Her eyes glimmered with fear and memory. He controlled half the district. Everyone was afraid of him, even your family. He wanted the workshop, and when Adriano refused, he destroyed everything in his path. Ethan felt a deep chill, a sensation that was both familiar and alien. This fury, this sorrow, it did not belong to Ethan Price, yet it surged in him with all the weight of Adriano's past. He had lived decades in a world unaware of these memories, and now the storm of them had returned, demanding resolution. Lucia pulled out a worn newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges, and handed it to him. The headline screamed, "Local clockmaker found dead in alley. Authorities suspect robbery." Ethan stared at it, recognizing the lie. Robbery had never been the cause. It was a cover-up, a shield for a man who thrived on intimidation and fear. He could feel the weight of Adriano's last moments. The alley, the echo of heavy boots, the gun, the cold inevitability of death, and the golden light of dawn filtered through the narrow streets of Matera, brushing over stone walls and casting long shadows that seemed to move with the rhythm of memory. Ethan walked slowly, letting the city absorb him, letting Adriano's presence settle finally into the quiet corners of his soul. Every step was familiar, yet every breath reminded him that he was no longer the man who had died decades ago. He was Ethan Price, yet part of Adriano lived within him, carried forward across continents and lifetimes. Lucia followed silently, her eyes reflecting both concern and wonder. She had seen the change in him over the past days, the way he had carried himself with confidence not entirely his own, the moments of quiet reflection when he would pause mid-step, listening as if the walls themselves whispered to him. "This city," she said softly, "it has watched centuries pass. It holds stories of lives that were lost, of love and betrayal, of courage and fear. And now, you have brought one of them home." Ethan nodded, a deep calm settling over him. The memories of Adriano were no longer just vivid fragments. They were whole, cohesive, and he carried them like a shield tempered in fire. He remembered the laughter of Elena, the scent of baked bread in her bakery, the chimes of the small church bell that had marked so many ordinary, yet significant moments. He remembered the fear in the alley, the final shot, the cold metal of the gun pressing into his chest. But now those moments had meaning beyond pain. They were history, both personal and eternal. He led Lucia to the old plaza, the same place where Adriano had once spoken to neighbors, laughing and sharing small joys. Children played in the sun, their voices ringing like music through the city. Ethan paused, letting the scene wash over him, feeling a strange equilibrium between past and present. "Do you feel it?" Lucia asked. "The balance that's been restored?" Ethan looked at her, a small, almost imperceptible smile laugh.